The sacrificial altar was where you went when your mate decided your life was worth less than his ambition. And as Vera stood before the dying Alpha King, her wrists bound in iron chains that burned against her skin, she understood one truth with perfect clarity. The man she'd loved had traded her for power. 3 days ago, Draven had whispered promises against her lips. 3 days ago, he'd sworn their mate bond was sacred. Now he stood at the edge of the throne room, watching her be led to slaughter with nothing in his eyes but cold calculation. The dying king sat on his obsidian throne, more corpse than man. His skin was pale as bone, his veins visible like black rivers beneath the surface. They said he'd been cursed 5 years ago. They said he survived by consuming the life force of sacrificed mates, draining them until nothing remained but empty shells. They said no sacrifice had ever survived the ritual. Vera was meant to be his next meal. But as the king's hollow gaze found hers across the silent hall, something flickered in those death-touched eyes. Not hunger, not cruelty, confusion. "This one is different," he rasped. Vera didn't understand what he meant. She didn't understand why her blood felt like fire instead of fear. She didn't understand why the ancient marks on the altar beneath her feet had begun to glow. All she knew was that Draven had sacrificed her to save himself. He didn't see this coming. None of them did. The morning of her sacrifice had begun with a lie. "The king has requested a diplomatic envoy," Draven had said, fastening the ceremonial cloak around her shoulders. His fingers had lingered at her throat, tender, loving. "You'll represent our pack. It's an honor." Vera had believed him. Why wouldn't she? He was her fated mate, the man whose soul was supposedly bound to hers by the ancient magic that governed their kind. When she'd found him 2 years ago, she'd thought she was the luckiest woman in Valdris. She didn't feel lucky now. The journey to Valanthor had taken 2 days. She'd noticed the armed escort growing larger with each passing mile, but Draven had dismissed her concerns with a kiss. "Protection," he'd murmured. "The roads are dangerous." The first crack in her trust had appeared when they'd crossed into Valanthor's borders. The land here was sick. Trees stood leafless and gray despite the summer season. The grass was the color of ash. Even the sky seemed dimmer, as if the sun couldn't bear to look upon what the kingdom had become. "What happened here?" Vera had breathed. Draven's jaw had tightened. "The king's curse. It spreads from him like rot. His land dies as he dies." "Then why are we here?" He hadn't answered. The second crack had come at the castle gates. Guards hadn't greeted them as diplomats. They'd greeted them as captors, surrounding her with weapons drawn while Draven stepped smoothly to the side. "Draven?" Her voice had trembled. "What's happening?" The third crack, the one that shattered everything, had come with his words. "I'm sorry, Vera." He hadn't sounded sorry at all. "But Alpha Corvain requires a sacrifice, a mated wolf, willingly offered by her partner. And I've offered you." The world had stopped. "You're lying." The words had fallen from her lips like stones. "This is some kind of test. You're testing my faith in you." But Draven's face had remained impassive. Worse than impassive. Relieved. Like a man setting down a burden he'd carried too long. "Our mate bond was convenient," he'd said. "Your father's territory, your family's alliances. I needed those. But Fenella offers more. The High Council's daughter offers everything." Fenella. Her closest friend since childhood. The woman who'd wept with joy at Vera's mating ceremony. The woman who'd sworn she'd never covet what wasn't hers. "She wouldn't," Vera had started. "She already has." Draven's smile had been thin, cruel. "For months now. And once you're gone, officially dead as a noble sacrifice, I'll be free to claim her without scandal." The guards had seized her then. Vera had fought, screamed, clawed, called upon their mate bond to force him to feel her anguish. But there was nothing. The bond she'd cherished, The connection she'd believed unbreakable was hollow, dead. Maybe it had always been dead. Maybe she'd been feeling an echo of something that never truly existed. Now she knelt before the altar in the throne room of Valanthor, her knees bruised against cold stone, her wrists raw from iron chains. The hall was vast and decayed, its once grand pillars cracked and crumbling. Cobwebs hung from chandeliers that no longer held candles. The windows were filmed with grime, allowing only gray light to filter through. And at the far end, upon a throne of black volcanic glass, sat Alpha King Corvain. He was younger than she'd expected. The dying king had ruled Valanthor for 12 years. She'd imagined an elderly man, withered by time. But Corvain couldn't have been more than 30. The curse had aged him in other ways. His black hair was streaked with silver, his cheekbones sharp beneath skin stretched too tight. His lips held a bluish tinge, and his hands, gripping the armrests of his throne, were skeletal. But his eyes, gods above, his eyes. They were the color of winter storms, pale and piercing, and they burned with an intelligence that his failing body couldn't diminish. Those eyes swept over her now, cataloging, calculating. Another tribute. His voice was a ruin, rough and rasping, as if every word cost him pain. Tell me, Draven of Valdris, what do you seek in exchange for your mate's life? Draven stepped forward, and Vera felt her stomach lurch with hatred so pure it shocked her. An alliance, Your Majesty, Draven said smoothly. Valdris offers you this sacrifice freely. In return, we ask only for your favor when you recover. Trade routes, military support, the usual arrangements. Recover. Corvain laughed, a horrible wet sound. You believe I will recover? Your Majesty has survived 5 years through these rituals. I have delayed death. The king's storm-gray gaze flickered to Vera, and she forced herself not to look away. Each sacrifice buys me months, sometimes weeks. The curse is patient. It knows I'll weaken eventually. It knows every soul I consume tastes more bitter than the last. Vera's blood chilled. Consume. He was going to consume her. Then my mate will buy you more time, Draven pressed. She's young, healthy. Her life force should be substantial. Should be. Corvain leaned forward, and Vera saw the effort it cost him, the tremor in his arms, the flash of pain across his features. Bring her closer. The guards dragged her forward until she knelt at the base of the throne steps. This close, she could see the black veins more clearly, crawling up his throat like creeping vines. This close, she could smell death on him, cold and inevitable. But she could also smell something else, something beneath the decay. Pine and smoke, rain on stone. A scent that made her wolf stir for the first time since Draven's betrayal. Look at me, Corvain commanded. Vera raised her chin. If she was going to die, she'd die with her eyes open. The king studied her face for a long moment, his brow furrowed. Those pale eyes narrowed, then widened. This one is different, he rasped. Your Majesty? Draven's voice held a note of uncertainty. But Corvain wasn't listening. He reached forward with one trembling hand, and before Vera could flinch, his cold fingers touched her forehead. Light exploded behind her eyes, and she heard a voice, not the king's, something older, something buried deep in her own blood, whisper 3 words that changed everything. At last, finally. Then the altar beneath her erupted in flames. Vera didn't burn. She should have. The flames roared up from the ancient stone, engulfing her completely, licking along her arms and hair and face. The guards stumbled backward with cries of alarm. Draven shielded his eyes against the blinding light, but Vera felt nothing but warmth. Gentle, golden warmth that sank into her bones and chased away the chill of the iron chains. The chains themselves groaned, then shattered, falling away from her wrists like brittle ice. She stood without meaning to. Her body moved of its own accord, rising from the altar with a grace she'd never possessed. The flames danced around her, through her, becoming part of her. And in the chaos of light and fire, she saw him. Alpha Corvain had risen from his throne. His skeletal frame swayed, barely supported by legs that looked ready to collapse. But his eyes, those winter-pale eyes, were fixed on her with an expression she couldn't name. Awe, fear, hunger, hope. Soul Weaver, he breathed. The word meant nothing to Vera, but her wolf knew it. Her wolf howled inside her, finally awake after 2 years of docile silence. And the howl wasn't grief or fear. It was recognition. The flames died as suddenly as they'd ignited. Vera stood alone in a circle of scorched stone, her clothes somehow intact, her skin unmarked. The altar beneath her feet was covered in glowing symbols she'd never seen before. Ancient spirals and crescents that pulsed with fading warmth. The throne room had gone utterly silent. What? Vera's voice cracked. What just happened? No one answered. The guards stared at her like she was a ghost. Draven's face had gone pale as milk, his carefully composed expression finally cracking into something like terror. Good? A vicious part of her thought. Be afraid. But it was Corvain who finally spoke. Everyone out. His ruined voice had found strength somewhere, cutting through the shocked silence like a blade. Now. The guards didn't need to be told twice. They fled, boots thundering against the cracked marble floor. Only Draven remained, rooted in place, his eyes darting between Vera and the king. Your Majesty, he started. I don't understand what... You brought me a soul weaver. Corvain descended the steps of his throne, each movement costing him visible pain, but he didn't stop until he stood before Vera, close enough that she could see the pulse struggling beneath his jaw. Did you know? Was this your plan all along? I don't know what a soul weaver is, Draven said quickly. She's just a common wolf, nothing special. There must be some mistake. Nothing special. Corvain's laugh was bitter, broken. Your mate just survived the sacrificial flame, the same flame that has consumed 47 wolves before her. The same flame that feeds my curse, and you call her nothing special. 47. The number landed in Vera's chest like a physical blow. 47 wolves had died on this altar. 47 mates had been sacrificed by those who should have loved them, and she was meant to be 48. I want him gone, Vera heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange, steadier than it should be, threaded with something resonant. I don't want to look at him anymore. Corvain's gaze shifted to her. For a moment, something almost like approval flickered in their depths. You heard your mate, he said to Draven. Former mate. The correction came from somewhere deep in Vera's gut, from the hollow place where their bond should have been. He severed our bond the moment he offered me as meat. Draven flinched. Vera, I didn't know. Leave. Corvain's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire hall. Leave my kingdom. If you return to Velenthor's borders for any reason, I will not consume you. I will simply tear you apart. That is not a curse. That's a promise. For one terrible moment, Vera thought Draven would argue. His jaw worked, his hands clenched, and she could see him calculating, trying to find an angle that would salvage his political ambitions. Then his gaze met hers, and whatever he saw there made him step back. This isn't over, he said softly. To her or to Corvain, she wasn't sure. Then he turned and walked out of the throne room, and Vera felt the last thread of her old life snap cleanly in two. Silence reclaimed the hall. The king swayed on his feet, and Vera instinctively reached out to steady him. The moment her hand touched his arm, she gasped. His skin was ice. Not cold, ice, as if winter itself lived in his veins. But beneath the cold, she felt something else. A flicker of warmth, buried deep, struggling to survive, like an ember smothered by snow. You're burning alive, she whispered. But the fire's trapped inside you. Corvain stared at her. You can feel that? I can see it. The words came without thought, without understanding. The curse, it's not killing you. It's freezing you, trapping your soul in ice so slowly that no one can tell the difference. His breath caught. No one has ever... He stopped, steadied himself, and stepped away from her touch. The moment their contact broke, Vera felt the strange vision fade. No healer has ever seen past the symptoms. They see the decay, the weakness. They don't see what's underneath. What is underneath? Corvain's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he turned back toward his throne. I was not always the dying king, he said quietly. Once, I was simply Corvain, an alpha with a kingdom, a people, a future, until someone decided my reign should end. Who? The woman I was going to marry. His voice held no emotion, but Vera saw his hands tremble as he gripped the throne's armrest. She wanted power she felt I couldn't provide, so she performed a dark ritual while I slept. The curse would have killed me in days, but she underestimated my bloodline's strength. I've been dying slowly ever since. 5 years of watching my body fail, my kingdom wither, my people suffer. Vera's throat tightened. She thought of Draven's betrayal, fresh and bleeding. Then she imagined living with that betrayal for 5 years, watching it poison everything she touched. The sacrifices, she said slowly. The other wolves, they fed the curse? They fed me. Self-loathing dripped from every word. The curse requires life force to sustain itself. If I don't consume souls, it consumes mine faster. So I became a monster to survive. I told myself it was for my people, that I needed to live long enough to find a cure. His laugh was hollow. Now I don't remember if that's true anymore, or if I simply don't want to die. Vera should have hated him. By all rights, he was her enemy, a king who devoured sacrifices like a beast. But standing in this crumbling hall, watching him fold into his throne like a man carrying centuries of grief, she couldn't summon hatred. He was another kind of victim, different from her, but damaged in parallel ways. What happens now? She asked. I didn't die on your altar. Does the curse still need feeding? Corvain's winter-pale eyes found hers. That depends, he said, on what you're willing to become. The question hung in the air, heavy with implications she didn't yet understand. Tell me, Vera said. And so he did. The terms were simple. The arrangement was not. Soul weavers were exterminated 3 centuries ago, Corvain explained. He hadn't moved from his throne, but he'd gestured for her to sit on the steps below him. It was an odd picture, a dying king and his would-be sacrifice, conversing like scholars instead of enemies. The old kings feared them too much to let them live. They could sense soul bonds, manipulate life force, break curses that should have been unbreakable. I've never done any of those things, Vera said carefully. Until today, I didn't even know this power existed. It was dormant, waiting. Corvain studied her with unnerving intensity. Soul Weaver bloodlines were nearly destroyed, but sometimes the gift skips generations, hides itself until triggered by extreme circumstances. Extreme circumstances, Vera repeated flatly, like being sacrificed by my mate to a dying king. Precisely. She laughed despite herself, a sharp, brittle sound that echoed strangely in the empty hall. So my worst nightmare woke up my greatest gift. There's a cruel poetry in that. Most magic is cruel. Corvain's expression didn't change, but something in his voice softened almost imperceptibly. The question is what you intend to do with it. Vera met his gaze. I don't know what I can do. I don't even know how I survived the altar. Everything inside me feels different, loud, like there's music playing that I can almost hear but not quite. You were never ordinary. The certainty in his tone startled her. I felt it the moment they dragged you into this hall. Your soul is bright, painfully so. Looking at you is like staring at the sun after years in darkness. Heat crept up Vera's neck. Is that why you didn't kill me? I couldn't have killed you if I wanted to. Corvain tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he couldn't solve. The curse tried to feed. It reached for your life force the way it's reached for 47 others, but you burned it back. Your soul rejected the consumption. So I'm useless to you. The words came out more relieved than she intended. As a sacrifice, yes. Corvain paused. As something else? Perhaps not. Before Vera could ask what he meant, a door at the far end of the hall creaked open. She tensed, expecting guards or worse, but instead a woman entered. Small, elderly, wrapped in robes of deep violet. Her white hair was cropped short, and her dark eyes were sharp with intelligence. Morwen, Corvain said by way of greeting. Come meet our guest. The old woman approached with surprising speed for her age. She stopped an arm's length from Vera, and her eyes narrowed. The flames spoke true then. Morwen's voice was rough like gravel scraping stone. I felt the altar awaken from my tower. I thought I was dreaming. You never dream, Corvain said. You've told me so yourself. Because nothing worth dreaming about has happened in 20 years. Morwen circled Vera slowly, examining her from every angle. Until now. A soul weaver. I never thought I'd see one breathing. Neither did I, Vera muttered. Can someone explain what I'm supposed to do with this power? Because I'd very much like to understand before it decides to erupt again. Morwen's lips twitched. Almost a smile. Direct. I like that. Most people circle around their questions like frightened rabbits. She turned to Corvain. She could break the curse. The king's expression didn't change, but Vera saw his grip tighten on the throne. That's what I suspected. Not suspected. Hoped. Morwen shot him a knowing look. Don't play stoic with me. Boy, I've known you since you were stealing sweets from the kitchen. You've been waiting for a miracle for 5 years. Now one walks into your hall and you're pretending indifference? I'm being cautious. Corvain's voice hardened. She's just discovered her power. She has no training, no understanding of what she carries. Asking her to break a curse that's killed every healer who's touched it. Who's asking? Morwen interrupted. I'm stating facts. She could break it. Whether she does is her choice. Both of them turned to look at Vera. The weight of their attention settled on her shoulders like a physical burden. Break a curse. Save a king. Use a power she didn't understand to undo something that had resisted every attempt for half a decade. I don't know how, she said honestly. This power, it feels immense, untamed. I'm afraid of what might happen if I lose control. That fear will keep you careful, Morwen said, but the gift is already waking. It needs guidance before it consumes you instead of serving you. Vera absorbed this. And if I agree to train, to try, then you stay here. Corvain's voice had gone careful, measured. In Valanthor, under my protection, I'll provide you with everything you need. Teachers, resources, safety. In exchange, you'll work with Morwen to understand your abilities. And when you're ready, he paused, and she saw the hope he was trying to bury. When you're ready, you'll attempt to break my curse. And if I fail, then you'll still have your training, your power. A place where no one can sacrifice you again. Something flickered in his storm-colored eyes. Something almost vulnerable. I won't force you. I've consumed enough unwilling souls. If you want to leave, I'll provide an escort to whatever territory will take you. But you should know that Draven will spin this story. By tomorrow, Every kingdom will hear that his mate tried to assassinate the Alpha King. You'll be hunted. Vera's blood ran cold. She hadn't considered that. Of course Draven would lie. He couldn't admit he'd sacrificed her, and failed. He'd need another explanation for why she'd survived, why he'd returned without her. Assassin. It was perfect. Sympathetic to him, damning to her. He'll say I attacked you, she realized aloud. He'll say worse. Morwen's voice held grim certainty. That you conspired with dark magic, that you're a witch, that your entire family was in on the plot. Her family. Vera thought of her Aunt Mira, her younger cousin Talene, everyone she'd left behind in Valdris when she'd followed her mate to what she'd thought was an honor. He'll hurt them, she whispered. To sell the story. He'll hurt them. Corvain's expression shifted, the first genuine emotion she'd seen from him. Anger. Cold, precise anger. I can send word to Valdris, he said, quietly. If your family can be extracted before Draven returns. Why would you do that? Vera searched his face for deception, for hidden motives. You don't know me. You have nothing to gain from protecting my family. I have everything to gain from you trusting me. The words were blunt, unapologetic. I need your help. I'm not foolish enough to pretend otherwise, but I'm also not cruel enough to let innocent people suffer for my benefit. There's been enough of that already. Vera stared at him. The dying king. The monster of Valanthor. The alpha who consumed sacrifices to survive. He looked exhausted. He looked haunted. He looked like a man who'd spent 5 years becoming something he hated and couldn't find his way back. She knew that feeling. In a smaller way, she knew it exactly. I'll stay, she said. Something eased in Corvain's posture. Relief, maybe, or just the absence of tension he could no longer afford. There are conditions, Vera continued. I'm not a prisoner. I come and go as I need. I want access to your libraries, your archives, anything that might explain what I am. And I want honesty. If something changes, if you decide I'm more useful dead than alive, you tell me. No more lies. No more betrayals. I've had enough of those to last a lifetime. Morwen let out a low whistle. Conditions from the sacrifice. I really do like her. Corvain's lips curved. Not quite a smile, but close. The expression transformed his gaunt face, revealing traces of the man he must have been before the curse. Handsome. Surprisingly so. Agreed, he said. All of it. Welcome to Valanthor, Vera. Such as it is. He extended his hand. A king's gesture, formal and binding. Vera hesitated only a moment before she took it. His skin was still ice cold, but this time she was prepared. She didn't gasp. She didn't flinch. She simply held on. And deep in her chest, where her wolf had gone silent for so long, something stirred in recognition. Not a mate bond. Nothing like the hollow echo she'd shared with Draven. Something else. Something older. Something that whispered, "This one is worth saving." Vera didn't know if the thought was hers or her wolf's, or the strange new power burning in her blood. But as she released the king's hand and met his pale gaze, she made herself a promise. She would learn what she was. She would master this gift. And when the time came, she would make everyone who'd betrayed her understand exactly what they'd thrown away. Starting with Draven. 3 days after Vera's arrival, the kingdom learned she existed. Corvain had tried to keep her presence quiet. The guards who'd witnessed the altar's flames had been sworn to silence, threatened with consequences severe enough to seal their lips. But secrets in a dying kingdom were like water through cracked stone. They found their way out, eventually. The whispers started in the servants' quarters. A new woman in the castle. Not a sacrifice. Something else. By the second day, the whispers had reached the noble houses clinging to Valanthor's borders. By the third, they'd become demands. They want to see her. Morwen delivered the news over breakfast in Vera's chambers, a modest suite in the castle's east wing, comfortable but not lavish. The remaining lords, the merchant guilds, even the temple priests, they're calling for a formal presentation. Vera set down her cup of tea. Presentation? A ceremony, Morwen clarified. Introducing you to the court, explaining your presence, giving them a story they can accept. What story? The truth? Morwen's laugh was dry as autumn leaves. The truth would start a panic. A soul weaver in Valanthor? Half of them would try to kill you out of fear. The other half would try to use you for their own purposes. No, we need something simpler. Such as? Corvain has an idea. Morwen's expression turned unreadable. You won't like it. An hour later, Vera stood in the king's private study, her arms crossed and her patience fraying. You want me to pretend to be your betrothed? Corvain sat behind a massive desk covered in maps and correspondence. He looked worse than he had 3 days ago, the shadows under his eyes deeper, the silver in his hair more pronounced. But his gaze remained sharp. Not pretend, he said carefully. The betrothal would be real, a formal contract. But it would never be consummated. It's a political arrangement, nothing more. A political arrangement where I bind myself to a dying king. Vera's voice came out harder than she intended. Forgive me if I'm skeptical of arrangements with men who want something from me. Something flickered across Corvain's face. Hurt, maybe, or understanding. I know what Draven did, he said quietly. I know why you have no reason to trust me, but consider the alternative. Right now, you're an unknown quantity, dangerous, suspicious. If I present you as a guest or a refugee, the court will tear you apart searching for your true purpose. But as my betrothed, as my future queen, you gain protection, status, authority they cannot challenge. And you gain what? A soul weaver bound to you by contract? I gain a partner. The word hung in the air between them. Someone whose interests align with mine. You want to survive. You want to master your power. You want revenge on the man who betrayed you. None of those things can happen if you're dead or imprisoned by paranoid nobles. Vera hated that he was right. Hated that his logic was sound, his reasoning solid. Hated that she was already considering it. The ceremony, she said finally. What does it involve? Relief softened the harsh lines of his face. A declaration before the court. An exchange of tokens. Nothing binding beyond politics. No mate bond, no claim on your body or soul. You remain free to leave when the curse is broken. If it's broken. And if I can't break it? Then you remain free regardless. Corvain held her gaze without flinching. I won't trap you here, Vera. I've been trapped for 5 years. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. The sincerity in his voice cut through her defenses more effectively than any argument. She searched his face for deception, for the hidden cruelty she'd learned to expect from powerful men. She found only exhaustion, and hope so fragile it looked like it might shatter at a touch. Fine, she said. But I have one condition. Name it. No more secrets. You tell me everything about this curse, where it came from, how it works, why the sacrifices feed it. If I'm going to break it, I need to understand it completely. Corvain was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Tomorrow, after the ceremony, I'll tell you everything. The ceremony took place at sunset. The great hall had been cleaned for the occasion, though nothing could hide the decay. Fresh candles burned in the chandeliers, but the wax dripped onto cracked marble. Flowers adorned the pillars, but they wilted within hours, as if the castle itself rejected anything living. The court that gathered was a shadow of what it must have been. Vera counted perhaps 50 nobles, their fine clothes faded, their jewelry dulled. They looked at her with suspicion, curiosity, and something else. Desperation. They wanted to believe in something. Anything. She would give them a performance then. Vera had dressed carefully for the occasion. Morwen had provided a gown of deep crimson, the color of Valanthor's royal house, with gold threading that caught the candlelight. Her dark hair was braided and pinned, exposing the length of her neck. She looked like a queen. She felt like a fraud. Corvain waited at the front of the hall, standing before his throne rather than sitting in it. He'd made an effort as well. Black formal attire that emphasized his height, his pale eyes striking against the dark fabric. Even weakened, even dying, he commanded attention. Vera walked toward him alone. No escort, no family. Just her own footsteps echoing against stone. The whispers started immediately. "She's beautiful, at least," someone murmured. "Where did she come from? Is it true she survived the sacrificial flame?" Impossible. No one survives. Vera kept her chin high and her expression neutral. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness invited attack. These nobles were no different from the ones in Valdris, predators waiting for vulnerability. She reached Corvain and stopped. Up close, she could see the effort it cost him to stand, the fine tremor in his hands that he hid by clasping them behind his back. "Lords and ladies of Valanthor," he said, his voice carrying despite its roughness. "I present to you Lady Vera of the bloodline Ashcroft. She has consented to become my betrothed and future queen." Gasps, shocked murmurs, a few outraged whispers. "Your Majesty." A lord near the front stepped forward, an older man with a sharp face and sharper eyes. "This is highly irregular. We know nothing of this woman, her bloodline, her loyalties." "Her bloodline is noble," Corvain interrupted coolly. "Her loyalties are to Valanthor now. That is all you need to know, Lord Rathmore. But the circumstances of her arrival are not your concern." The rebuke was quiet but absolute. Lord Rathmore's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. Corvain turned to Vera. In his hands, he held a small box of carved obsidian. "This belonged to my mother," he said, loud enough for the court to hear, but soft enough to feel intimate. "She wore it on her betrothal day, her mother before her. And now, if you accept, it will be yours." He opened the box. Inside lay a ring, silver metal twisted around a stone that glowed faintly purple. Not a gemstone Vera recognized. Something older, something that hummed with quiet power. A soul anchor, Morwen had called it during their brief preparation. It will help you focus your abilities. Accept it as a tool, not a chain. Vera extended her hand. Corvain slid the ring onto her finger, and the moment the metal touched her skin, warmth flooded through her. The ever-present chill of the castle receded, the strange music in her blood, the power she still couldn't control, settled into a clearer rhythm. She looked up at Corvain and saw that he'd felt it too. His storm-colored eyes had widened slightly, his breath catching. "It's working," he murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. "Your power, it's responding." "To what?" "To me." He sounded as surprised as she felt. "That shouldn't be possible." Before Vera could respond, he turned back to the court. "Lady Vera has accepted," he announced. "The betrothal is sealed. You will treat her with the respect due my future queen. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. Is that understood?" Silence. Then, reluctantly, the court bowed. But Vera saw the looks they exchanged, the suspicion that hadn't faded, the questions multiplying behind their eyes. She'd bought herself time, protection, a place in this dying kingdom. But she hadn't bought their trust. That would have to be earned. And as Lord Rathmore's gaze found hers across the hall, cold and calculating, she knew that earning it wouldn't be easy. The training began the next morning. Morwen led Vera to a chamber deep beneath the castle, an ancient space carved from living rock, its walls covered in symbols that pulsed with faint light. The air here felt different, charged, like the moment before lightning struck. The sanctum, Morwen explained, built centuries ago for exactly this purpose, training those with gifts too dangerous to practice above ground. How comforting, Vera muttered. You're saying my power might collapse the castle. I'm saying we take precautions. Morwen gestured to the center of the room, where a circle had been etched into the stone floor. Stand there, close your eyes, and try not to set anything on fire. The first session was brutal. Morwen pushed her to reach inward, to find the source of the flames that had erupted on the altar. But the power slipped away every time Vera grasped for it, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. You're thinking too hard, Morwen said after the third failed attempt. This isn't like learning to fight or read. Soul weaving isn't a skill, it's an instinct. You don't reach for it. You let it reach for you. Easy for you to say. Sweat beaded on Vera's forehead. You've never had fire explode out of you without warning. No, I've had worse. Morwen's dark eyes held shadows Vera didn't ask about. Now try again. This time don't chase the power. Just listen to it. Vera closed her eyes. She breathed deeply, trying to release the tension in her shoulders, and she listened. At first, there was nothing. Just her own heartbeat, the distant drip of water somewhere in the cavern. Then, gradually, she became aware of something else. Music. Not real music, nothing she could describe to another person, but a rhythm, a melody that existed beneath everything. It hummed in the stones beneath her feet. It whispered in the air against her skin. It sang in her own blood. She followed the melody inward, and there it was. A flame, but not ordinary fire. This was light itself, condensed and burning at the core of her being. It had been sleeping for 23 years, waiting for something to wake it. Waiting for betrayal and pain and the absolute certainty that she was going to die. Now it was awake, and it wanted to be used. Hello, she thought at it, feeling foolish. The flame pulsed in response, warm, welcoming. Can you show me what you are? Images flooded her mind. She saw wolves, hundreds of them, gathered around a woman wreathed in radiant light. The woman touched each wolf in turn, and where she touched, wounds healed, bonds strengthened, curses shattered. She saw kings kneeling before figures like the woman, begging for judgment, for mercy, for the truth their enemies tried to hide. She saw a great fire sweeping across a battlefield, not destroying, but revealing, showing each warrior the soul of their opponent, showing them that the enemy was just like them. The battle had ended without another blow, and she saw the purge, dark figures with masked faces hunting the light touched through forests and cities, bodies burning, not with their own power but with cruel, ordinary fire. Children screaming, bloodlines exterminated, fear. That was why her kind had been destroyed. Fear of what they could see, what they could reveal, what they could change. Vera gasped and opened her eyes. She was kneeling on the stone floor, her hands flat against the etched circle, warm radiance pulsing beneath her palms. Goddess above, Morwen breathed. The old woman was staring at her with something like fear. No, not fear. Awe. What did you see? Morwen asked. Everything. Vera's voice shook. My ancestors. What we were. What we could do. Why they killed us. And we weren't dangerous. The realization hit her like a physical blow. We were inconvenient. We could see truth. Real truth. Soul-deep truth. We could reveal what people tried to hide. Kings with dark hearts. Alliances built on lies. Bonds that were false. Like hers and Draven's. The thought struck hard. Had she always known, somewhere deep down, that their bond was hollow? Had her dormant gift been trying to warn her for 2 years while she ignored it? The old kings were terrified, Morwen said quietly, Soul weavers couldn't be fooled, couldn't be manipulated. They held the powerful accountable. So the powerful destroyed them. But I survived. Vera looked at the fading warmth beneath her hands. My bloodline survived. Hidden. Dormant. Waiting for someone strong enough to carry the gift fully. Morwen knelt beside her. You're that someone, Vera. I've known it since the altar. But now I'm certain. The power chose you. And it will not be wasted. They trained for hours more. By the time Morwen finally called a halt, Vera's entire body ached with a fatigue that went deeper than muscle or bone. Using the power drained something essential. Some reservoir she hadn't known she possessed. Rest, Morwen commanded. Eat. Sleep. We continue tomorrow. Vera nodded numbly and climbed the long stairs back to the castle proper. The corridors were empty. It was well past midnight, the torches burning low. She was so exhausted she almost walked past the figure standing in the shadows. Almost. You're awake, she said, stopping abruptly. Corvain stepped into the torchlight. He looked worse than he had that morning, the tremors more pronounced, his skin nearly translucent. But he was dressed, alert, waiting. Morwen sent word, he said. She told me what you saw. And you came to check on me? I came to answer your questions. He gestured down the corridor. As I promised. No more secrets. Vera should have been too tired for this conversation, but curiosity was its own kind of energy. Lead the way. He took her not to his study but to a small balcony overlooking the dead gardens. The night air was cold, sharp with the scent of decay. But above them, stars burned bright. The one thing the curse couldn't touch. Corvain gripped the stone railing, staring out at his withered kingdom. Her name was Thessaly, he said without preamble. We were betrothed from childhood, a political match. But I thought we'd come to love each other. I was wrong. Vera stood beside him, close enough to feel the unnatural cold radiating from his body. She was ambitious, Corvain continued. More ambitious than I realized. Being queen wasn't enough. She wanted power. Real power. The kind that bends wills and breaks nations. When she realized I would never pursue conquest, never become the tyrant she wanted, she decided to take what she needed another way. The curse. Thessaly was a witch. Something I never suspected. She hid her powers perfectly, playing the devoted betrothed while plotting my destruction. And one night, while I slept, she performed the ritual that would consume me for 5 years. What does the curse actually do? Corvain was quiet for a long moment. Then he raised his hand and pulled aside the collar of his shirt. Vera inhaled sharply. The black veins she'd glimpsed before were worse than she'd imagined. They spread across his chest like a dark web, pulsing faintly with each heartbeat. At the center, directly over his heart, was a mark. A sigil burned into his skin, surrounded by frost that never melted. The curse feeds on my soul, he said. Every day it takes a little more. The sacrifices, the wolves I've consumed, they slowed the process. Their life force fed the curse instead of mine, but each sacrifice works less than the last. My soul is nearly gone, Vera. There's almost nothing left to take. How long? Weeks. Maybe a month. He let his collar fall. Without you, I would have been dead before autumn. The weight of that truth settled on Vera's shoulders. Weeks. She had weeks to learn an ancient power, master abilities that took her ancestors years to develop, and break a curse that had resisted every attempt for 5 years. Why didn't you tell the court? She asked. About how little time you have? Because they need hope. His pale eyes found hers in the darkness. This kingdom has suffered enough. If they knew their king was truly dying, that no amount of sacrifice would save him, they would give up entirely. Some would flee. Others would turn on each other. Valanthor would collapse before I'm even cold. So you let them believe the sacrifices are working. I let them believe there's still a chance. The bitter edge in his voice cut deep. Perhaps that makes me a liar. Perhaps it makes me a coward. But I've watched my people suffer for 5 years because of a choice I didn't make. I won't let my death destroy them completely. Vera studied his profile. The sharp jaw, the hollow cheeks, the winter gray eyes that held too much grief for one lifetime. He was a dying man fighting for time he didn't have. A king who'd become a monster to protect his people. And somehow, impossibly, she understood him. I'm not going to let you die, she said quietly. Corvain turned to look at her. Surprise flickered across his features. You barely know me. I know you haven't lied to me. Vera held his gaze. I know you protected me when you could have consumed me. I know you gave me a choice when everyone else in my life has taken my choices away. That's not... It's enough. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the cold emanating from his curse. It's more than I've had from anyone in a very long time. So I'm going to learn this power. I'm going to break your curse. And then we're both going to make the people who hurt us regret every decision they ever made. For a long moment, Corvain simply stared at her. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. You're terrifying, he said softly. Good. Vera allowed herself a small smile in return. You should see what happens when I'm really motivated. The weeks that followed blurred together in a rhythm of training, exhaustion, and unexpected intimacy. Morwen pushed Vera harder each day. She learned to summon the warm radiance deliberately, to shape it into shields and lances, to read the souls of those around her without being overwhelmed by the flood of information. Each session left her drained but stronger. The power that had erupted chaotically on the altar was becoming something she could wield. But it was the evenings that changed everything. Corvain began joining her for dinner in her chambers. The first time, he'd claimed it was to discuss strategy, to share information about the curse, the witch who'd created it, the political situation in Valanthor. But strategy didn't require the soft conversations that lingered long after the food was cleared. Tell me about your family, he said one evening, 3 weeks into her training. Vera set down her glass of wine, a vintage from before the curse, carefully preserved. What do you want to know? Anything. Everything. He sat across from her, not at the head of the table but beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. I want to understand where you came from. What made you who you are? No one had asked her that before. Not Draven, who'd been interested only in what she could provide. Not Fenella, who'd smiled at her secrets while plotting betrayal. My parents died when I was young, Vera said slowly. A fever that swept through our village. My Aunt Mira raised me after that. My mother's sister. She and my cousin Talon are the only family I have left. She sounds like a strong woman. She is. Vera's throat tightened. She taught me that survival isn't weakness, that bending doesn't mean breaking. I didn't appreciate those lessons until now. Corvain's cold hand found hers on the table. The touch was hesitant, almost questioning. She didn't pull away. My mother was the only person who truly knew me, he said quietly. When she died, I felt like I'd lost my compass, like I was navigating without stars. How old were you? 15. My father followed her within the year. Grief, the healer said. But I think he simply couldn't imagine a world without her. His thumb traced a small circle on the back of her hand. They had what so few people find, a real bond. A true one. Unlike yours. Unlike mine. The words hung unspoken between them. I thought I had that with Draven, Vera admitted, but now I wonder if I ever did. My power was dormant, but I should have felt something. Some warning. Perhaps you did. Corvain's pale eyes held hers. Perhaps you ignored it because you wanted to believe. Is that better or worse? Being fooled or fooling myself? I don't think it matters. His voice was soft. What matters is that you survived. You're here. You have the chance to build something real. Something real. Vera found herself leaning closer, drawn by a gravity she didn't fully understand. The cold radiating from Corvain's curse should have repelled her. Instead, she wanted to warm him, to reach the ember she'd sensed beneath the ice on that first day. Your power, Corvain said suddenly. When you touch me, the curse quiets. What do you mean? The pain lessens. Wonder threaded through his voice. For a moment, just a moment, I feel like myself again. Like I'm more than a dying shell held together by stolen souls. Vera's breath caught. I didn't know. Neither did I. Not until now. He looked at their joined hands. What are you doing to me? I don't know. But she did, didn't she? Some instinct buried deep in her soul weaver blood recognized what was happening. Her power reached for his curse without conscious effort, fighting the ice, feeding the ember, healing him, slowly, imperfectly, but healing him, nonetheless. We should stop, Corvain said. He didn't move away. This isn't part of our arrangement. No, Vera agreed. She didn't move away either. The fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, rain began to fall. The first rain Valanthor had seen in months. As if the land itself was responding to something shifting in its king. I dreamed about you, Corvain said. The confession seemed to surprise even him. Before you came, before the altar, I dreamed of a woman wreathed in blazing light, standing in the ruins of my throne room. I thought it was a vision of my death. And now? Now I think it was a vision of my salvation. His free hand rose, hesitated, and then gently touched her cheek. You terrify me, Vera. Not because of what you can do, because of what you make me feel. Her heart pounded. What do I make you feel? Alive. The word was a ragged whisper. For the first time in 5 years, I feel alive. The space between them shrank to nothing. Vera felt the cold of his lips before they touched hers, a frost that should have burned. But beneath the cold was warmth, desperate and seeking, and she answered it with heat of her own. The kiss was gentle, tentative. Two broken people reaching for connection. Soulweaver fire flickered at the edges of Vera's vision. The curse hissed and recoiled, unable to bear the touch of her power. And for one perfect moment Corvain's skin was warm beneath her hands. They broke apart, both breathing hard. That's never happened, Corvain said, staring at his own hands. Warmth. Actual warmth, fading already but undeniable. The curse has never retreated. Not once. Not ever. Vera's mind raced. The kiss. The contact. Her power responding instinctively to his pain. I think, she said slowly, I know how to break the curse. Before Corvain could respond, the door to her chambers burst open. Morwen stood in the doorway, her face ashen. You need to come to the Great Hall, she said. Now. Both of you. What's happened? Morwen's dark eyes met Vera's. Draven is here, and he's not alone. The Great Hall was chaos. Vera burst through the doors with Corvain beside her, Morwen trailing close behind. What she saw stopped her cold. Draven stood in the center of the hall, flanked by a dozen armed wolves bearing the crest of Valdris. But it wasn't his presence that made her blood freeze. It was the woman beside him, Thessaly. Vera recognized her instantly from Corvain's descriptions. The golden hair, the cruel beauty, the smile that didn't reach her calculating eyes. The woman who had cursed Corvain. The woman who had started all of this. And she stood at Draven's side, like she belonged there. Ah, there she is. Draven's voice dripped with false warmth. My beloved mate. How I've missed you. I'm not your mate. Vera's voice came out steady despite the fury pounding in her chest. You severed that bond when you tried to feed me to a dying king. Tried? Draven's smile sharpened. I thought I'd succeeded. Imagine my surprise when I returned home to find you hadn't died at all. When I heard rumors that you'd somehow survived the sacrificial flame and bewitched the Alpha King into making you his queen. She bewitched no one. Corvain stepped forward, and despite his weakened state, power radiated from him, the authority of a king who had ruled for 12 years. Lady Vera is my betrothed by choice, my choice, and hers. Your choice. Thessaly's voice was honey over poison. How touching. You always were sentimental, Corvain. It was your greatest weakness. Corvain's jaw tightened. What are you doing here? Thessaly? Come to admire your handiwork? To watch me finally die? Actually? Yes. She stepped forward, her gown sweeping across the cracked marble. I've waited 5 years to see the curse complete. 5 years watching from afar while you clung to life with those pathetic sacrifices. But my patience has run out. Your patience. Vera's power stirred in her chest, responding to her anger. You cursed him, destroyed his kingdom, killed dozens of innocent wolves. And you speak of patience? Thessaly's gaze shifted to Vera, and something flickered in those cold eyes. Interest. Wariness. The Soul Weaver, she murmured. I'd heard rumors, but I didn't believe them. Your kind was exterminated centuries ago. Clearly not thoroughly enough. No. Thessaly smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That was a mistake. One I intend to correct. She raised her hand, and the air around her shimmered with dark energy. Witch magic. The same magic that had created Corvain's curse. Thessaly, wait. Draven stepped forward, his expression suddenly uncertain. You said we were here to negotiate, to reclaim Vera and secure the alliance. Did you really believe that? Thessaly laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. You're useful, Draven, but you're not intelligent. I needed you to get me into this castle, nothing more. Draven's face went pale. What are you? Thessaly's magic lashed out. Not at Corvain, not at Vera, at Draven. The bolt of dark energy struck him in the chest, and he crumpled with a scream that echoed off the stone walls. Black veins erupted across his skin, the same veins that marked Corvain's curse. The curse requires a vessel, Thessaly explained calmly, watching Draven writhe on the floor. Corvain's body is failing. His soul is nearly depleted. I need a new host to anchor my power, and Draven so generously volunteered. Horror flooded through Vera. Draven deserved punishment, deserved to suffer for what he'd done to her. But this was something else entirely. You're not just cursing him, she realized. You're stealing his soul, using it to fuel your own magic. Clever girl. Thessaly's eyes glittered. Soul weavers always did understand these things better than anyone. Yes, I feed on souls. Where do you think the curse's power comes from? Every sacrifice Corvain consumed, I consumed too. Every life force he drained, I siphoned for myself. You used him. Corvain's voice shook with rage. All these years, I thought I was surviving. I thought the sacrifices were keeping me alive. But they were feeding you. They were doing both. Thessaly shrugged elegantly. I'm efficient that way. But now I don't need you anymore. Draven will be my new puppet king, and Valdris will be my new kingdom. More prosperous, more powerful, more useful than this rotting corpse of a nation. She raised her hand again, dark energy gathering. Wait! Vera stepped forward. You want a soul? Take mine. Vera, no. Corvain grabbed her arm. A soul weaver's soul? Thessaly paused, interest sparking in her eyes. That would be substantial. More power than I've consumed in decades. But why would you offer yourself? You just escaped one sacrifice. Why walk into another? Because you'll leave him alone. Vera kept her voice steady. Corvain, his kingdom, his people. You take me, and you leave them in peace. Vera. Corvain's grip on her arm tightened painfully. I won't let you. You don't get to decide for me. She turned to face him, and the look in her eyes made him fall silent. No one decides for me. Not anymore. Not ever again. Thessaly studied them both with growing amusement. How touching. The dying king and his soul weaver, willing to sacrifice themselves for each other. It's almost romantic. Do we have a deal? Vera, do we have a deal? Thessaly smiled. We do. She released her hold on Draven, letting him collapse unconscious on the floor, and turned her full attention to Vera. Dark energy swirled around her hands, hungry and eager. Come here, little soul weaver. Let me taste what you're made of. Vera stepped forward, and as she did, she reached deep inside herself, past the fear, past the anger, past every wound Draven and Thessaly and her whole broken life had inflicted. She reached for the flame. It answered. Blazing light erupted from her skin, radiant as a second sun. The dark energy recoiled, hissing and spitting where it touched her power. Thessaly stumbled backward, shock breaking through her composure for the first time. What? The witch gasped. You wanted my soul? Vera's voice resonated with power that wasn't entirely her own. Come and take it. The battle that followed would be spoken of for generations. Thessaly hurled curse after curse, waves of dark magic that should have shattered bones and withered flesh. But Vera's radiant power met each attack, dissolving the darkness like morning sun burning away fog. Impossible, Thessaly screamed. Your power should be raw, untrained. You've had weeks at most. Weeks with the best teacher in Valanthor. Vera advanced steadily, her power growing stronger with each step. And something you didn't count on. What? Motivation. Vera's light lashed out, wrapping around Thessaly's wrists like blazing chains. The witch shrieked as the power burned her. Not her skin, but something deeper. Something essential. You feel that? Vera's voice was calm despite the storm raging through her veins. That's your stolen souls. Every life you've consumed. Every person you've murdered to fuel your magic. They're still there, Thessaly, trapped inside you, screaming for release. You can't. I can see them. Tears streamed down Vera's face, not her tears, but theirs. The 47 wolves sacrificed to Corvain's curse, Draven's victims in Valdris, countless others stretching back years. I can feel their pain, their rage, their desperate need for justice. Let me go. Thessaly struggled against the luminous bonds. I'll give you anything. Power. Wealth. Draven's head on a pike. You have nothing I want. Vera stepped closer. Accept the truth. Tell me how to break Corvain's curse. Truly break it, not just slow its progress. I'll never... Vera tightened the chains. Thessaly screamed as the stolen souls within her surged toward freedom, battering against the walls of her body like prisoners clawing at cell doors. Tell me. The curse anchors in the heart, Thessaly gasped. It freezes the soul from the inside out. The only way to break it is to replace the frozen soul with something stronger, something warmer. How? A true bond. The words tore from Thessaly's throat against her will. Not a forced mate bond or a political arrangement, a genuine soul bond, two souls that recognize each other, choose each other, love each other without condition or reservation. Vera's heart stuttered. A true bond. She thought of Corvain's hand in hers, the way his curse retreated when she touched him, the warmth that flooded through the ice when they kissed. That's why you chose him, she breathed. You cursed him specifically because you knew he'd never find a true bond. You made him into a monster. isolated him, and ensured no one would ever love him genuinely. He was supposed to die alone. Hatred twisted Thessaly's beautiful face into something ugly. Cold and alone, feeding on scraps of stolen life, never knowing what real warmth felt like. That was his punishment for rejecting me. Rejecting you? I loved him. The confession burst out like poison from a wound. I would have done anything for him, been anything for him. But he never saw me as more than a political obligation. He never looked at me the way he looks at you. The jealousy in her voice was raw, festering. 5 years of hatred, and it all came down to this. A woman scorned, unable to accept that love couldn't be forced. He didn't reject you because he was cruel, Vera said quietly. He rejected you because you weren't his. And deep down, some part of him knew it. So instead, he gets you? Thessaly laughed bitterly. A broken woman sacrificed by her own mate? How is that fair? It's not about fair. Vera reached for the radiant chains binding Thessaly, feeling the souls within the witch crying out for release. It's about what's real. And what you built. This curse. This stolen power. This empire of consumed souls. None of it is real. It's all just hatred wearing a pretty mask. Thessaly's eyes widened. What are you? Vera pulled. The Soul Weaver fire blazed brighter than before, and Thessaly screamed as every stolen soul tore free from her grasp. They poured out of her in a river of silver light, 47 from Corvain's sacrifices, hundreds more from years of dark magic. They swirled around the great hall like a storm of stars, finally free. And as they rose, they turned to look at Vera. Thank you. They whispered in voices like wind through leaves. Thank you, Soul Weaver. Then they were gone, ascending through the ceiling of the hall, passing beyond the mortal world to whatever peace awaited. Thessaly collapsed. Without the stolen souls, she was nothing. A hollow shell, a woman who had traded her own humanity for power and now had neither. She crumpled to the floor beside Draven's unconscious form, her golden hair spreading across the cracked marble like spilled sunlight. Vera swayed on her feet. The effort had cost her everything. Her vision blurred, her legs buckled. Strong arms caught her before she fell. I have you. Corvain's voice was rough with emotion. I have you, Vera. You're safe. The curse, she managed. Did it work? Are you? Look at me. She forced her eyes to focus and gasped. The black veins were fading. Even as she watched, they receded from Corvain's throat, his chest, his face. Color flooded back into his cheeks. The silver in his hair remained, but his skin was warm, genuinely warm, against her body. How? She whispered. You released the souls she'd stolen. Corvain's voice cracked. Including the parts of mine she'd been consuming. The curse had nothing left to feed on. Nothing left to freeze. But she said it required a true bond. Vera. He cupped her face in hands that no longer trembled. Don't you understand? We already have one. She stared at him. From the moment you touched me, he said softly. I felt it. Something waking up inside me. Something that recognized you. I thought I was imagining it. I thought the curse was playing tricks on me. But it was real. You're real. And whatever this is between us, it's the truest thing I've ever known. Tears spilled down Vera's cheeks. I thought I'd never have this. After Draven, I thought I was broken, unlovable, cursed in my own way. You saved me. Corvain pressed his forehead to hers. You saved my kingdom. You freed 47 souls that I condemned to torment. How could I not love you? You love me? I love you. The words were simple, certain, unshakable. I love you, Vera. And if you'll let me, I will spend the rest of my life proving it. Vera's answer was a kiss. Not gentle this time, not tentative. This kiss was fire and promise and the absolute certainty that they had found something worth fighting for. And around them, the great hall of Valanthor began to change. The transformation started slowly. As Corvain and Vera broke apart, the first crack appeared in the grime-covered windows. Sunlight, real sunlight, poured through, illuminating decades of dust and decay. The cobwebs shriveled. The withered flowers in their vases began to lift their heads. Outside, someone screamed. Not in fear, in wonder. The gardens, Morwen breathed from the doorway, where she'd watched the entire confrontation. The gardens are blooming. They ran to the balcony, Corvain's steps strong and steady for the first time in 5 years. Below, the dead gardens were erupting with life. Grass pushed through the ashen soil, emerald green and impossibly vibrant. Roses burst into bloom, red, white, gold, climbing the castle walls as if racing toward the sun. Trees that had stood leafless and gray sprouted leaves so quickly you could watch them unfold. And it wasn't just the gardens. Across Valanthor, the curse was shattering. Reports would come later, of rivers running clear for the first time in years, of crops springing from barren fields, of the perpetual gray clouds parting to reveal blue sky. The land itself was healing, responding to its king's restored soul. But first, there was justice to serve. What do we do with them? Morwen nodded toward Thessaly and Draven, both still unconscious on the great hall floor. Vera looked at her former mate, the man who had traded her life for political advancement, who had conspired with a witch, who had believed she was worth nothing. Part of her wanted him to suffer. Part of her wanted him to feel every ounce of pain he'd caused her, but a larger part was simply tired. "Lock them in the dungeons," she said. "We'll hold a proper trial. Let the people of Valanthor decide their fate." "And if they choose death?" Vera met Corvain's eyes. He nodded slowly. "Then they've earned it," she said. "But the choice won't be ours. We've had enough of one person deciding another's fate." The guards came to drag Thessaly and Draven away. As they lifted Draven, his eyes fluttered open. For one moment he looked directly at Vera. "I'm sorry," he croaked. "I didn't know she would—" "You knew exactly what you were doing when you sacrificed me." Vera's voice was ice. "You just didn't expect me to survive. Don't waste your last words on apologies you don't mean." They dragged him away. Vera didn't watch him go. "There's something else," Morwen said quietly. "Something I discovered while researching your bloodline." She hesitated. "It might explain why Thessaly reacted so strongly to you, why your power awakened so completely. Tell me." The witch who first hunted the Soul Weavers 3 centuries ago, the one who led the purge, she wasn't acting alone. She had a partner, a sister. Together, they nearly exterminated your kind. What happened to them? The sister had a change of heart. She tried to protect the last Soul Weavers, help them hide their bloodlines. But her partner, her twin, never forgave the betrayal. She swore that she would destroy every Soul Weaver descendant, even if it took centuries. Understanding dawned. Thessaly, her bloodline at least. The hatred was passed down through generations, along with the knowledge of how to hunt your kind. Morwen's dark eyes were solemn. When Draven brought you to Valanthor, when Thessaly realized what you were, she must have felt like fate had delivered her enemy directly into her hands. And the sister? The one who helped my ancestors survive? Morwen smiled. It was the first real smile Vera had seen from her. Her name was Morwenna. She was my ancestor. I've spent my entire life waiting for a soul weaver to find their way to Valanthor, hoping I could help undo what my family's shame began. Vera stared at the old woman, this fierce, sharp-tongued teacher who had pushed her so hard, demanded so much. "You knew," she breathed, "from the beginning. You knew what I was, what I could become. I suspected. The altar confirmed it. Morwen reached out and clasped Vera's hands. You've done more than break a curse, child. You've healed a wound 300 years old. The debt my bloodline owed yours. It's finally paid. Tears pricked Vera's eyes. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me yet. Morwen's eyes twinkled. You still have a kingdom to help rebuild, a wedding to plan. And unless I'm mistaken, a certain alpha king who's going to be insufferably devoted for the rest of your very long lives. Vera laughed. A real laugh, bright and free in a way she hadn't felt in years. 3 months later, Vera stood in the great hall of Valanthor. The transformation was complete. The cracked marble had been repaired. The chandeliers blazed with fresh candles. Flowers, real, living flowers that didn't wilt, adorned every surface, and the hall was packed. Nobles from every kingdom in the realm had come to witness this day. Lords and ladies, alphas and their mates, diplomats and dignitaries, even representatives from Valdris, a new leadership council that had overthrown Draven's allies after learning the truth of his betrayal. Among them, in a place of honor near the front, stood 2 figures Vera had thought she'd never see again. Her Aunt Mira, her younger cousin Talon, the family Draven had threatened to destroy, extracted by Corvain's agents before the truth became public. They'd arrived a week ago, and Vera had wept in her aunt's arms for an hour. She wasn't alone anymore. The ceremony was simple, but profound. No elaborate rituals, no political posturing. Just Vera and Corvain standing before their people, making promises they intended to keep. I claim you as mine, Corvain said, his storm-gray eyes bright with emotion. Not because you can break curses or save kingdoms, because you saw me at my worst and chose to stay, because your soul recognized mine and didn't look away. I claim you as mine, Vera answered. Not because you're a king or because you protected me, because you gave me choices when everyone else took them, because you believed in what I could become before I believed it myself. The mate bond snapped into place. Not the hollow echo Vera had shared with Draven. This was a supernova, a connection so complete, so overwhelming, that for a moment she couldn't breathe. She felt Corvain's joy, his love, his absolute certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. And she knew he felt the same from her. My people, Corvain announced, his voice carrying through the hall. I present to you my mate, my queen, my soul weaver, Vera of Valanthor. The cheering shook the walls. 1 year later, Valanthor was unrecognizable. The kingdom that had once been a wasteland of ash and decay now bloomed with impossible abundance. Crops grew faster and healthier than anywhere else in the realm. Traders came from distant lands to purchase Valanthor's goods. The population had doubled as refugees, and settlers flocked to a land that seemed blessed by the gods themselves. But the greatest change was in its rulers. Corvain stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the sunset paint the gardens in shades of gold and rose. He looked nothing like the dying king Vera had met a year ago. His skin was warm, his body strong, his silver-streaked hair a mark of character rather than decay. He smiled now, frequently, genuinely, in a way that made the entire court do double takes. You're brooding, Vera said, joining him at the railing. Her hand found his automatically, their fingers intertwining. I'm reflecting. His thumb traced circles on her palm. There's a difference. What are you reflecting on? How different everything is. He pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her waist. A year ago, I was counting my remaining weeks, preparing for death, wondering if anyone would even mourn me when I was gone. And now? Now I'm counting the years ahead, the decades, the lifetime I get to spend with you. He pressed a kiss to her temple. It doesn't feel real sometimes. It's real. Vera leaned into him. All of it. the kingdom, the people. Us. Us. He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that still made her heart skip. I like the sound of that. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. In the distance, they could see the lights of the village beginning to flicker on. Families gathering for evening meals, children's laughter carried on the breeze. The council wants to discuss the Witch Academy again tomorrow, Vera said eventually. Of course they do. Corvain sighed. Lord Rathmore still objects. He objects to everything I propose. I think it's personal. It's definitely personal. He was Thessaly's strongest supporter before the curse. He's never forgiven himself for not seeing what she was. That's his burden to carry, not mine. No. Corvain turned her to face him. Your burden is much simpler. Oh? What's that? Making sure I don't become insufferably devoted. He grinned. Morwen's words, not mine. Vera laughed. I think it's too late for that. Probably. He kissed her. Soft, slow, full of promise. I have news, by the way, from Valdris. Good news? The best. His pale eyes sparkled. The council has stripped Draven's family of all titles and lands. Everything he built on our pain. Gone. His name will be remembered as a traitor's. A cautionary tale for anyone who thinks to sacrifice their mate for power. And Fenella? The woman he betrayed me for? Exiled. Corvain's voice held grim satisfaction. When the truth emerged, the High Council's daughter became the High Council's shame. She fled before they could formally disown her. Last reports placed her in the northern wastes, living as a commoner. No title, no mate, no future. Vera felt nothing for her former friend. Some betrayals were too deep for even satisfaction. And Thessaly? Executed last month, publicly. The families of her victims were given the chance to speak before the sentence was carried out. Corvain's expression sobered. It was difficult to hear. All those lives she destroyed. But it's over now. Truly over. And Draven? The curse Thessaly placed on him couldn't survive her death. It consumed what remained of his soul within hours of her execution. Corvain's expression held no sympathy. He died the same way he intended you to die, devoured by magic he thought he could control. Vera absorbed this. She'd expected to feel satisfaction, triumph. Instead, she felt only peace. I don't think about them much anymore, she admitted. Draven, Thessaly, Fenella, the mate bond that was never real. They feel like characters from someone else's story. That's because they are. Corvain cupped her face in his hands. Your story started the moment you survived that altar. Everything before was just prologue. Very poetic. I've been practicing. She kissed him again, and the mate bond hummed between them. Warm, radiant, unbreakable. There's one more thing, Corvain said when they parted. Something I've been waiting for the right moment to mention. What? He placed his hand on her stomach, just rested it there, warm and steady. Vera's breath caught. Morwen confirmed it this morning, Corvain said softly. Our line continues. A child. Their child. A baby conceived in love, born to parents whose souls had chosen each other. How? Vera whispered. How did you know before I did? I felt it. Wonder filled his voice. Through the bond. A new light growing inside you. Small, but bright. So bright. Tears spilled down Vera's cheeks. Happy tears. Overwhelmed tears. A baby, she breathed. Our baby. Corvain pulled her close and she felt his own tears against her hair. Our family. They held each other as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to emerge. In the gardens below, fireflies danced. In the castle, servants prepared for another peaceful night. And in Vera's chest, the soul weaver flame burned steady and sure. She thought of everything she'd survived to reach this moment. A mate who'd traded her for ambition. A curse that should have killed her. A power she'd never known existed. Enemies who'd wanted her dead, and allies who'd helped her rise. All of it had led here. To this balcony. This man. This future. "I love you," she said. "I love you," Corvain answered. "Forever." And Vera knew, with the absolute certainty of a soul weaver who could see the truth of hearts, that he meant it. Forever. The sacrificial altar was where you went when your mate decided your life was worth less than his ambition. And as Vera had stood before the dying Alpha King, her wrists bound in iron chains that burned against her skin, she'd understood one truth with perfect clarity. The man she'd loved had traded her for power, but she had survived. She had done more than survive. She had blazed. She had broken a curse that had withered a kingdom for 5 years. She had freed 47 souls trapped by dark magic. She had found a true mate, a real bond, a love that defied everything she'd been taught to expect. Draven had sacrificed her to a dying king. He didn't see this coming. None of them did. And now, with a child growing beneath her heart and a kingdom thriving under her care, Vera understood something her betrayer never would. Some flames can't be extinguished. Some souls can't be consumed. And some women, when thrown into the fire, don't burn. They rise,